Billy Napier is one of the most calculated and intentional coaches that we have ever had at UF. When he speaks, he doesn't speak with much fluff. He's direct and to the point. What he said this week, though, should have all UF fans excited and might be a subtle warning to the rest of the SEC. We'll get into that in just a second. But let's talk about it now, and then we'll get into some recruiting info later on in the video. Coach Napier recently interviewed with On3's Sam Spiegelman and said something that may have surprised most fans. Napier was quoted as saying that the Gators were light years ahead of where they were at this point in the offseason last year. Now, that is a bold statement for obvious reasons. UF's win total in Vegas this year is predicted to be 5.5. FPI has UF at 8 wins, which we talked about in an earlier video. But I don't think that what Napier is talking about actually has anything to do with wins and losses. What I think it has to do with is where the team is from, one, an X's and O's perspective. Where these guys are understanding his system is so much more advanced than where they were at this point last year. All right, they're in the second year of Napier's system. These players are a lot more comfortable with it, and they're much more of Napier's guys, right? Originally, when Napier came in, the entire roster was Dan Mullen's recruited players, and Napier has done a very quick job of turning that roster over. Currently, the vast majority of it is made up of either guys he recruited out of high school, guys he's recruited from the transfer portal. Most of Mullen's players did not stick around. Most of them are gone. I think that was by Napier's design. He's got some more guys in place that he wants, guys that buy in, which brings me to my next point. Culture perspective. All right, I think this team is light years ahead of where they were last year at this time from a culture perspective. Napier did a really good job of weeding out guys that were no doubt talented, but really didn't necessarily buy into what he and his staff were selling, right? And that is important when you bring in a new head coach. Not every player fits with every coach. There is sometimes hurt feelings when there's turnover from one staff to the next. Napier had to make sure that he had the guys in place, the guys that stayed from Mullen's team that were able to buy in with what Napier was selling, with what his staff was doing, what their vision was, and that they were willing to be 100% on Napier's team, that they were going to leave their old ways in the past and completely 100% buy in. I think that from a culture perspective, this team is really different than where they were a year ago. But most importantly, I think this team is very different than where they were a year ago from a talent perspective. Okay? Now, listen. I know that you guys get all up in arms about this every time we talk about it because everything flows through the quarterback. But UF is going to be better at several positions this year. Okay, at running back, Trevor Etienne and Montrell Johnson, add in Cam Carroll. This is probably going to be the best running back room in the conference and potentially the best running back room in the nation, all right? UF had great running backs last year. That room was obviously incredibly talented. But now it's a year older. This is huge. This is one of the most talented groups in the country. Florida's also going to be better at wide receiver. Listen, they've got guys like Ricky Pearsall coming back, who's going to be a leader. He potentially is going to have a 1,000-yard season. Then you've got younger guys like Caleb Douglas, Aiden Mizell, Andy Jean, etc. There are so many young, talented guys on this roster that this wide receiver group took a huge step forward this year. Another area that is absolutely improved from a talent perspective is offensive line. It's going to be more deep than we saw last year, which is saying something because last year's offensive line was pretty darn good. But from the conversations we've had from people that are around the program on a regular basis, this offensive line depth is better than it was last year. UF has guys like Richie Leonard, Rod Kearney, Cameron Waits, Najee Harris, Austin Barber, Micah Mazuka, lots of guys. Now listen, we're going to see who's healthy by the start of the season. We're going to see who's able to stay healthy throughout the season. But as it sits, UF's offensive line roster is deep and will be an improvement over last year's already improved offensive line. Linebacker is another position where Florida has taken a step forward, particularly with some of their impact transfers. They're also recruiting really, really well for the linebacker position for the 2024 class. So this is a group that I think will continually get better. But the linebackers are going to be improved overall this year, which is good because they needed some improvement last season. I also really, really like what we're hearing about the secondary. And I think that the defensive line is going to stay the same as we saw last year, will be at least as good as we saw last year, despite losing Dexter. So I think that's good news as well. Now, obviously, quarterback is a big part of it. But I've heard some things this week that we're going to be doing a video on soon that make us believe that the situation is going to sort itself out in the right way and maybe soon. So make sure that you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss it. But listen, all of this said, we'll continue to bang the drum that just having consistent average quarterback play is good enough to get the job done for UF this season. All right? Florida does not need a lights out quarterback. They need a game manager because there is lots and lots of offensive talent on this team. The Gators want to be a running team. They should be a running team with the amount of talent that they have in that running back room. All they need is a game manager. They're going to rely on getting the ball to their playmakers in space. Their offensive line is going to give the quarterback time to make good decisions when it's fully healthy, if the offensive line stays fully healthy, gets fully healthy. But here's another huge piece. Consistency. That is what is going to be huge for the Gators this year. I think we're going to see this team be much more consistent. I think you're going to see a Florida quarterback who makes good decisions consistently. Last year, AR was pretty boom or bust, right? He certainly went out and was a major reason that we won the Utah game to open the season. But he just couldn't put it together consistently. He was a huge reason that we were in it against LSU and Tennessee. But he could never really find that consistency throughout the season. So as a result, the team never really found its true identity. This year, I believe that they'll be able to rely on what they know, which is their running game, getting the ball to playmakers and not asking too much of the quarterback. The defense is going to absolutely take a step forward with Austin Armstrong in command. So I think that we're going to see a lot more complementary football being played as well. And we've talked a lot on this channel about the importance of Corey Raymond coaching the entire secondary. This is another thing that I think is going to be huge for the Florida Gators. This was a really good decision on Billy Napier's part for a lot of reasons, but I think that we are going to see the results on the field this season. Now, do I have concerns? Listen, absolutely, I do. I think that this team has an absolutely brutal schedule. Probably the toughest in the country. But if we can take a step forward on defense and special teams, y'all know I love my special teams and they need to be better this upcoming season. There is zero reason why UF can't win 7 or 8 games. They've played Tennessee, LSU, and FSU extremely close last season. Those games could have gone either way. 2 of those 3 games were actually on the road. Billy Napier knows his team. He knows that what he just did by saying their best team is light years ahead was put an expectation out there. He just put more pressure on them. Fans aren't going to think critically. And outside of the 5,000 or so of you who watch this, hey, hopefully more of you will share it with your friends. Fans aren't going to think that deeply about what Napier said. They're just going to think that he's promising more wins. You can't be light years ahead and then finish with less wins than you had last year, even if your schedule's harder. Here's the big thing though. Napier knows that. He knows all of this. He is very calculated with his words. This is not a coach that just shoots off at the mouth, right? We don't hear very often from Billy Napier, and he likes it that way. He comes from the Saban school of dealing with the media. He knows that every word he says is going to be analyzed and then overanalyzed. He knows he just put more pressure on his team. So what are they going to do about it? Or does Napier know something that the rest of us don't? Is it possible that he's sending a warning to the rest of the SEC to not count the Gators on the Gators being down? I'll tell you this. If he's saying it and the team goes for 5 or so wins, people are not going to be thrilled with Coach Napier hyping this team. So maybe it was a subtle warning. We'll see. What are your thoughts? Do you like Napier's comments? Do you like him putting additional pressure on this team? Let's chat about it below. Okay, so we said we'll have a quick recruiting update. In our last video, we predicted a few commitments from the big recruiting weekend that UF had. We still think that UF did a phenomenal job this weekend and that they will get multiple commitments, possibly even some this week, but as a result of this weekend. We've also been told that the staff didn't want to pressure guys into making an emotional decision. They're confident in the work that they did, and we still feel extremely good that there are guys that may end up picking the Gators, and soon. If you missed the video where we talked about it, click right here to watch it.